Okay, this is Molly Ray. Welcome to our second video in our texture drawing series. Before we start today, I made some notes about adding texture to your drawings. In your drawings, you're going to want to draw your objects with 3D form and then shade them with a light value to create the local color of the object. So if you were creating a tree that we did last time, this tree is brown. So when I do the initial shading on it, I'm going to use a light brown color to establish the local color. Just as in the grass, I put the green down first and then put the grass lines over the top. Today we're going to work with a couple of other types of texture. The first of those is cross-hatching. Cross-hatching lines are one of those textures that you think that you probably won't use, but then you end up using quite a lot. I'm going to work with my browns here. I have a light, a medium, and a dark. Cross-hatching is when you have lines that come from two different directions. I'm going to use my medium so you can see it show up good here. So you're starting with your same basic hatching technique, but then you're going to come across as well. So if you're working with fabric or a basket or bricks or anything that has a rough texture, flannel shirts, those types of things, all kinds of different things that you will find to use this texture for. So I'm going to show you how to do a brick wall. That is one of the most common, well, not most common, but common patterns that I like to teach my students. The pattern behind the brick wall is a simple one. If you've ever played with Legos and you've ever tried to build a house and your wall fell down, it may have been because your Legos weren't overlapped correctly. So when you're creating a brick wall, we observe reality, right? So if you look at a brick house or a brick wall or a concrete block building, you'll notice that the blocks are staggered so that the center of one lines up with the center of the other. And if you're a Lego person, like my family is, you will know that if you stagger your blocks like that, then your wall won't fall down either. Okay? So this is a basic pattern that you can start with to practice adding texture. You might use this to make a house or a wall or any other number of things. My students, once we go through learning all of the elements of art, they get to choose a picture and they can make anything they would like. So I get all kinds of things. So you'll notice I'm going to turn this into an actual wall. I'm adding the three-dimensional form element at this time, making my angles go back in space. They are all the same angle in the top of the wall and the side of the wall. Then I'm doing my parallel lines. We've just learned how to make cubes, so this is a natural extension of cube making. Okay. Then I'm going to shade and add my local color. So since this is a three-dimensional form, I know that the front of this wall and the top of this wall and the side of this wall are going to be three different shades. So if my light is coming from up here, I'm going to shade this top part of the wall a light brown. Okay. And I'm going to switch to my medium, and I'm going to shade a very light medium on this side that's facing me, because since this side is facing me, I am looking at the wall from this perspective, so I'm going to have the opportunity to add quite a bit of texture and detail into this side of my wall. Okay, now this side is away from me. It's going back in space. This is our depth. Remember, we have our width, how wide the object is, how tall it is, and then we have how far it goes back into space. So this is going to be my darkest wall. So my local color that I'm adding first off, is going to be darker on this side. So I've already established the illusion of 3D form. You wouldn't necessarily have to do a lot more to this. I'm going to go back and put my lines in a little bit darker right here so that I can see the lines of my bricks. Okay. So the next step is to add some texture. You can see the pattern very plainly. And I want to offer some ideas here for texture. So you have the cross hatching, and we already know how to do hatching. There's another texture called stippling. Stippling is just dots, okay? When you apply the dots, you can give the illusion of a texture. It might be sand, it might be rocks or gravel. There's also scumbling. Scumbling are loops, also good for gravel or sand or rocks, or like a baseball field diamond. Many, many different things that you can do with all of these. I will show you some examples in a little bit. But to add character to our bricks, we're going to be a little bit creative. If you've ever felt a brick has a rough texture. So an easy way to add a rough texture, I'm going to push a little bit harder, so this is the same color that I colored in my background. I'm going to add some hatching lines to my brick. I could also do some cross hatching. I can do the entire surface of the brick. Or I can just do a small area. I can add some stippling. If you have ever been paying attention in a cinder block building, you can oftentimes see the stippling, the pocking of the surface of the cinder blocks, especially if they've been painted. You might even see a little bit of shadows. So those are 3 simple things that you can do to your brick wall to give them a little bit of texture. And the third thing on my list is to increase contrast and add shadows to create depth. Well, we put a little bit of a shadow here already. But how do you add contrast to create depth? Well, I'm going to go back and do a little bit more shading around here. When I add my texture this direction, I'm going to want to keep in mind that my brick is moving in a different direction here. So it's not moving, but the texture of it is going to be moving in a different direction. I can also come in and I can change the contrast a little bit if I want it to be a little bit darker in some places. Add a little bit of detail. Okay, to increase. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of finished brick walls and other things that I've done, because there's a lot of different options here. So in this example, I used some red. I also added some green touches that might represent moss. Have some grass growing along the edge, got some stippling, maybe some gravel. Here when you're working with the gray, using 2 different colors of gray and a little bit of black. Some of these stones are very old and they have been rounded by time. And they have a little bit more shading, a little bit more character to each individual stone. So don't limit yourself. I have had many students want to know how to create a castle. So with your castle, you have your arched doorway, you have your main castle wall, and you have the cylinder. We learned how to draw a cylinder. You have to think about the point of view, the view from which you're seeing your castle is your perspective. If you're looking down at your castle, you might see in between the bricks at the top. If you are looking at it, you might see more of a flat surface. You might see the walls going back in space. This one is a very detailed stone wall, more of an older style stone wall compared to a regular brick wall. I encourage you, if you want to take screenshots of these, I'll try to hold them still a minute or two. My kids that use my videos like to take screenshots of things so then they can look at them later without having to watch the whole video again. Okay, lots of detail here. But you have unique bricks, even made a little bit of a border, figuring out how to do those 3D forms. Got some flames and some other things that I'm going to be showing you here in a minute. So those are some other options. This one's kind of a construction site. It kind of looks like it's got all kinds of stuff going on. Railroad ties stacked down here. For the railroad ties, it's just a long cube, and you're using your texture from your tree bark. This is a stone sidewalk, so it's a different way of doing the stones. You make your lines diagonally, like when you're making a cube, and each one is kind of an individual cube there on the end where you can see them. Okay. So that's a little bit more with your cross hatching and your how you put together a texture drawing. So I'm going to stop here, and then I'll do a third video that shows a little bit, one more pattern and a few invented textures.